hat off? Are we videotaping?
It is taping, yeah. Okay.
You're not going to do anything to embarrass me, are you?
What
Like putting that on?
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
I do have some notes.
Okay.
I didn't have notes
This
last
is
time.
more thorough than me. Let me just look at these real quick. What?
Well, I wanted to be prepared.
Bird, fish, bear.
I wanted to be prepared. I made references to some pages, right? Because this is the very first time.
I have 6 too. Yeah.
It's the very first time I've ever written in a book. I actually, in a couple of places, wrote
Interesting.
words, and I highlighted. I found myself highlighting too much at times, so then I overcompensated by not highlighting at all, and then I think I hit the right rhythm at the end. I just highlighted right enough.
Interesting. Well, but also you like the beginning better, right? Okay, I'm gonna do a little intro. I'm probably gonna include that, but we can just start off with talking about the annotations. But hey, everybody, we are back. Me and my dad. We are doing another video on Pure Color by Sheila Heti. Yeah, so this was really interesting.
We have the exact same book. Last time we didn't have the same book.
Yeah, well, this is a newer book.
We had the same.
I don't even know if there are 2 versions of this.
That's a good point.
When
was this actually written?
2018 or something.
Newish.
I have her book from. I brought this down just in case. This is from 2012 or something like that. How Should a Person Be? I read it for class in like April of last year and didn't finish it, and then I finished it a couple months later. So it kind of sporadically, but. Honestly, this was really good.
I'm not familiar with it.
Like all the way through, this might be better, but...
Fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction. It's actually based on a friend of hers. It's very interesting, but Luxie is kind of like a play. And at the same time, a novel.
You know what's a unique thing about her?
What?
As an author, is her first name. That's my mom's first name. It's not a very common name.
Oh yeah.
I very rarely see Sheila. Anyway, I wasn't familiar with her at all.
She's from Canada.
Nor was I familiar with this book. Nor have I ever heard of that book.
Okay, anyways, Pure Color, Sheila Heti. We decided to do this book because, well, I was just reading it because it's been on my list for a long time. And I was like 5 pages in, and we were thinking about doing The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which I know is kind of heavily requested. We will get to that.
We actually bought 2 versions of that. Gave you one. I even started it again. And
Did you actually?
And then you told me we're not going to read it. So.
I just have so many projects going right now. But we will do The Secret History. We will do Martyr as well.
I really, really want to read Martyr.
By Kaveh Akbar.
Yeah.
And yes, the hardcover's down there, and I have one as well. So we will do that. We will have more coming in the future. I know White Noise was cool because we both really, really love the book. This is a little different, maybe.
Is it?
Well, did you really, really love the book?
Parts of it I thought were.
Okay.
Parts of it were fantastic.
Yeah.
And it didn't sustain.
No. I mean, I kind of agree. I switched opinions many, many times throughout this. But anyways, let's just start at the beginning. So, in terms of synopsis, this is really tough because it kind of loses its plot a couple of times. But we kind of start with the idea that this world that we are in, right? The one we are in is like God's first draft.
We're in the first draft of the world.
Yeah, so it's like it is art criticism is very heavily scattered throughout this to the point that the main character is actually like going to school to become an art critic. But essentially everybody in this world is an art critic. They're critiquing God in his first draft, and he's going to take in the criticism and create a second draft. And what's most interesting about that for me, and this is kind of skipping ahead throughout the whole book, is that all the things that we criticize in terms of, I think there's a point where she talks about, the death of her parents, and how in the second draft there won't be any death. Like that's one of the flaws in the world right now. But then she's like, well, who the heck would want to live for 1,000 years? So it's like taking these pieces that are being critiqued, kind of reflecting on the way we currently critique them, as if, I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but you get what I mean? Like, the parts that are being critiqued are actually the best parts, if that makes sense.
So you mentioned there'll be no more death. One of the things I liked about the whole concept of this being the first draft, and that hits like right away. It was like page 1, page 2, and I just thought that was such a really cool idea.
Because you go from her telling you stuff to the plot, so like right away she's just telling you.
Yeah,
first draft.
And,
This is what's
and and basically the next draft will be better.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
It'll be better.
Yeah. Sorry, this
I don't know-
one sucks.
I don't know how they'll know. Yeah, and there's a lot of gloom there's a lot
There
of
is,
gloom
yes.
embedded in it. But one of the things I really found to be interesting was it talked about there's a lot about love as well, and it talked about in the next draft. Will they? And I can go back and find the language, but it was something along the lines of will the people living in the next version of the world, they'll look back and think it odd that we needed to actually have children in order to find somebody to love, as opposed to just loving everybody, just loving humanity for the sake of humanity instead of having to have a child to sort of find a way to
be like, oh,
have
so
love.
close to us.
So it was just things like that were embedded throughout. I have a lot of notes. I didn't feel prepared for the last version of our recording, so I felt like you were like way more prepared than me. So these aren't my notes as much as just areas that I wrote things down and referenced the page number in case I wanted to go ahead. So I know I wrote down about the kids and loving. So the next draft I wrote down, will people just love the universe that no one needs children in order to know what love is? Will the next draft find out that we once had to create people in order for there to be someone we could love? And then it actually went on and made some comment about and there were already 8 billion people living in the world. Like, why do you need to have a kid?
And you need to have one that's like, okay, this is like made for me.
Now I could love someone because I couldn't find anybody to love in the 8 billion people that were living on the planet already. So,
well, do you want to talk about the kind of, because some people can love everyone. There's kind of she kind of separates things. This is another part of it. It almost reads like a Bible of sorts for our own world. It's like making concise statements. It's just telling you like through stories sometimes. And this is, again, part of it is a plot with a character named Mira, but part of it is just this. God did this. This is why this is this way. It will eventually be this way. Blah, 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 blah.
How do you think they know it will eventually? I kept on like, how do they know? How do they know it will be better? How do they know it will be different? Just because they're critiquing it and they're making that suggestion, or
that's an interesting thing to think about.
But God may not agree.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the narrator is in that second draft, maybe. I mean, Mira is not, but the narrator is all knowing. It's almost like the word of God. It's like
I kept
like Bible type.
How do they know? Right. So right.
Yeah.
It's very.
I didn't
use the word the
that,
other day, fragmented. It is just like there's almost like commentary, comments, and then there are things that will advance the plot.
Yeah.
But it's very loose and it's very short. The chapters are very short.
Yeah.
For the most part, the chapters are very short.
I mean, some of them are just like, I mean, where are we at? I mean, like here, you're like, I mean, this is like a longish chapter because this is like 2 full pages, but sometimes they're just...
Towards the end, they get a little bit longer like that.
Yeah, you're right.
Earlier.
I mean, look at that. I mean, that's like a full chapter. It's like 5 lines. But they're very pretty. And again, they're like here. It's like the day or second day after he died, she saw falling from the sky the first sprinklings of snow. She had never felt a greater quiet in her mind or her soul. She cared nothing for the world's busy activity. She felt in competition with no one. It's not even as beautifully written as a lot of the other ones, but that's just like, okay, this is like, that's the plot advancement there. It's like, oh, she felt she was really in tune with nature and her father's spirit.
Yeah.
And then bam, you go to... Then there was blah, blah, blah. Like, then you go back to the Bible sort of thing, I'll call it. So it is really fragmented. And I think the problem with that is, not that it's a problem, I actually really like it. But the problem with that is that the beginning sets you up for kind of a really lovely plot. And then that's kind of thrown out the window. I mean, some of it is like, the middle section, like say middle 70 pages are all about her father dying.
Yeah, very long. I remember texting, so a couple of things. The writing's lovely. I mean, it is beautiful. Parts of it are just like mind-blowing how
really, really pretty.
Really pretty it is. I remember texting you like, oh my God, this is going to be the best book ever. Like
yeah,
the first, I mean, I should pull up the text, but the first few pages were just fantastic, sort of mind-blowing, like what a cool idea, this whole idea of first draft and introducing the birds, the fish, and the bear,
which we still got to talk about,
which we'll talk about. And it was and it was pretty quick, like you were moving through it pretty quickly, and then you do
you really
I really like the book, but you do find yourself sitting in sort of the next series for a longer time. There was a lot on the dad dying. Lasted a very long time.
And I do know her father died while she was writing this.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So that's probably like it happened, and then she was like, okay.
How autobiographical do you think some of this is?
I mean, I've listened to a few podcasts because I found this book really relatable. At least the idea of Mira and the idea of the birds.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in what she thought about that and how she came up with that. And she mentioned that she's a bird and she's a lot like Mira and all these things, but I don't think she set it out to be autobiographical. I wonder how different it would have been if her dad didn't die. I think that's great. I mean, I think you should, if you're going through something, it should be reflected in the work you're doing.
So he passed while she was writing this?
Yes, like in the middle of the book, which you can almost kind of see.
Maybe that's why she sits in that for so long.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I mean, it's only, 200 pages?
Yeah, it's only 200 pages.
So I don't know how much that is, but the first part that I thought was sensational was 30 pages,
yeah.
and they're the short. I mean, they're really short chapters. It's very quick, and then I don't know if it was 70 or 80 pages in terms of his death, but it was quite a long amount of the book was dedicated.
And again, this is not like, we're really not spoiling anything. I mean, I guess it's kind of broken into 3 parts. So that beginning part that you really loved, kind of the dad dying and her reflecting on like the way that she's like been criticizing art. Then kind of she's in this is a little strange. I mean, it's going to sound a little off the rails, but she goes into this leaf. Her father is now one with the...
You have to say that even slower. Like, what did you just say?
Yeah.
Right? She's
inside a leaf with her father.
Like a leaf on a tree.
Yeah, a literal leaf. And she's like, this is what I've been, this is what I was intended to be. I think the line is like, I'd been looking for like the right size, how big I was supposed to be my whole life, and nobody ever told me it was just a leaf. But eventually she's forced to go back out into the world.
Well, but she also, like, when she was there, she regretted it, like, to some extent, like,
being in
can
the
these
leaf.
other leaves hear me? And right, like
she like understands the beauty of
Are there
everything.
people in those leaves?
Because
her
dad is content to be in the leaf.
Yeah.
Because he's lived his life and she's not. Which is really interesting. But anyway, okay, we have been putting this off completely because this is like the 3rd page of the book. The bears, the fish, and the birds.
Right.
I found that section really interesting, and we can actually read some of that out. There's like 3 eggs of people. The bird egg, the fish egg, the bear egg. People born from the bird egg are interested in beauty, order, harmony, and meaning. They look at nature from on high, in an abstracted way, and consider the world as if from a distance. These people are like birds soaring, flighty, fragile, and strong. People born from a fish egg appear in a flotation of jelly, and this jelly contains hundreds of thousands of eggs, where the most important thing is not any individual egg, but the condition of the many. For the fish, it's less any one individual egg that concerns them than eggs that are laid in the best conditions, where the temperature is most right and the current most gentle, so the majority might survive. For the fish, it's the collective condition that counts. A person born from a bear egg is like a child holding on to their best doll. Bears do not have a pragmatic way of thinking, in which their favorites can be sacrificed for a higher end. They are deeply consumed with their own. Bears claim a few people to love and protect and feel untroubled by their choice. And when I thought about that, I mean, that's kind of how it is. You have the person who is kind of at a distance. You have the person who is, caring more about everyone than any one individual or even themselves. It might be safe to say the bird cares more about themselves. And not to say artist, because like in this book, the artist in this book is fish. So it's not like there's any one way, but it does seem the bird seems to be correlated with the artist. She even says on the next page, right?
Can I
Go ahead.
Like this paragraph here, I think when I read this, I'm like, this book's going to be sensational.
Yeah.
So she goes on to say, people born from these 3 different eggs will never completely understand each other, right? They will always think that those born from a different egg have all of their priorities wrong. And I'm not going to read the whole paragraph, but it ends with, nothing makes a person feel like their life's work or their self is less seen than when it's being judged by someone from a different egg.
Yeah.
It just, I mean, this whole paragraph is very beautifully written, and it resonates very well with maybe how people work their way through their lives.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, the heart of the artist is a little bit hollow. This is talking about the bird. The bones of the artist are a little bit hollow. The brain of the artist is a little bit hollow, but this allows them to fly. And if we can talk a little bit about the bird, she is obviously a bird, and there's something in that separates her from everyone else, including, what was the girl's name? Annie, was it?
Yeah,
Annie. So there's a girl named Annie. who isn't in class with her, because that boy Maddie is in class with her. If what we're saying doesn't make sense, it's because it kind of doesn't actually make sense, the way that these people are existing in this place. But again,
Mara is in school.
She's in school.
Critic school. And that's where she meets.
She's probably getting like a MA in English or something like that, where she's reading text and critiquing them.
But you said she's bird,
yes,
right? And okay, fine.
I think
the paragraph refers to her as bird-like.
Yeah.
Right. So it says this particular story concerns a bird-like woman named Mara.
Yeah.
It goes on to say, for her father, who appears as a warm bear, like he clearly was a bear, but I wonder if he was always a bear. And she clearly doesn't feel like she's always a bird to me. She becomes to me, yes. And it makes you like just because you're born one way, does that mean you'll stay that way? Or you morph through the different animals? I mean, eggs, types of as you live. I think you do. I mean, I personally think you do. And I think she did. I felt like as I was reading later, I know I wrote in a few instances like she's a bear.
It because of the stuff with her father?
Yeah.
But didn't she say she liked art more than her dad?
She did. Maybe she struggled with her existence between maybe the way she felt and the different feelings running through her. It wasn't so clear cut. It reads so clear cut, and it's not so clear cut.
Well, that's part of the thing is I think you're trying to break away from just like putting everybody in a category.
Yeah.
But she is reflecting on having chosen a book over her father or art over her father. She'd rather spend time with art, with literature, than she would with her father. Not at this moment when he's dying, but like when she was growing up, and so that kind of kills her. But at the same time, she does say, it's like I'm feeling shame for who I was made to be. Because
she said right here, right? And this is very early, how Mara would have loved to have been born of the bear egg.
Yes.
Right? Like
So I think there's instincts in her, but I don't think she ever really crosses over because she doesn't actually, when she regrets choosing art over people, she always comes back and is like, but if I could do it over again, I'd do the same thing, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, she's trying to cross over.
Yes.
She's dipping her toe in the other, right? And more than that, it's deeper than that. But yes, struggling with it, right?
Yeah.
She's struggling with it. And actually, I highlighted that, not knowing what was to come, but it became apparent throughout that, to me, she struggled with, I guess, her identity.
So tell me a little bit about, I know you tend to just read a book because it's fun to read a book, and I kind of prefer to do that as well, but a lot of the times I have to annotate books and I have to write essays on them, and I'm, right now I'm reading a book for, like, doing a grant proposal for a research project, or reading a book because I'm going to interview the author.
Yep.
Things like that. I'm always having to, like, collect my ideas and type up thoughts and do all these things.
Yeah.
You don't tend to do that. You mentioned that this is the first book you've marked up.
It is.
And the interesting thing about it is it's almost one you kind of have to, because it's almost like, I mean, she's like a philosopher at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like, I read this book in a class where we only read Kierkegaard other than this.
Yeah.
Kierkegaard and Dostoevsky, like it was a philosophy class. So you're kind of reading something that's more ideas than a story, which is really interesting. And I wonder what you thought about that, and also the fact that you were having to, mark.
So I can handle any book, right? I can handle a dense book, and I can handle
besides Gravity's Rainbow.
Gravity's Rainbow has been.
Still
How many of you have actually read Gravity's Rainbow? There are a few books I've picked up a couple of times and tried to get through, and I've not been successful. And I've even enjoyed like the first 30, 50 pages. It's like, it's really good, but it's just daunting. And when I read a book, I do read it for entertainment.
Yeah.
People listening to your videos, I don't know if they're more similar to you, where I know you read it for entertainment as well, but you do get deeper and you'll annotate it and you'll make notes and you'll go, and you do that because you want to, and you also do it probably because you have to for classes. I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
So I want to be entertained, and it could be any type of a story, it could be any type of a book, it could be an easy read, a challenging read, fiction, nonfiction, a lot of density to it, a lot of maybe whatever. So, but I do find it challenging to then, after I read something, go back 2 or 3 months later and have a detailed conversation about it. That's why I had to read White Noise again.
Yeah.
I mean, it had been 20 years since I read that, but
Yeah.
I read this 3 weeks ago. I was like flipping through it last night. I'm like, okay, we're videotaping tomorrow.
Yeah.
I got to go back and just refresh my thoughts on it. So
Yeah.
I do read a little bit. I read a little bit differently than you read.
Yeah, but I mean, you got a lot.
But it's not.
Of notes
But it's not like I'm
on
just.
other
It's not like I'm
stuff.
just flying through books either. Like
Yeah.
I will. It will take me a while to get through
Yeah.
a book. I always have books going, but I don't necessarily throughout it try to piece it all together. I don't think of it in terms of if I was going to interview an author, if I was going to interview her, I would for sure read it differently,
Yeah,
or at
yeah,
least slow it down and make some notes. I did find it challenging. You know, I'm on an airplane with a highlighter, making notes.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's hard. I'm not sort of mentally trained to do that. I
Yeah.
read books, right? So I sort of try to flip a switch and go all into note taking and highlighting, and I even made notes here, and it's different, not something I'm used to.
But is it something where you're like, I thought that this like improved the experience, and I'm gonna read, you know, let's say DeLillo comes out with a new novel, and you're like, I'm gonna read this. Like, am I gonna highlight the lines I like? Am I gonna, you know, things like that?
I don't know, but I do know that you know, we'll talk, and you'll ask me a question about a book that I read 5 years ago, and I have a hard time answering that.
Mhm.
I just do, and it's interesting because I don't feel I would have the same challenges in answering that question if you asked me about a movie I saw 5 years ago. And
Yeah.
maybe because it's maybe the visual I don't know. So I probably would do better to make some notes and sort of which I'm doing a little bit now with Goodreads. Now that I have a Goodreads account,
Yes,
some of those
everybody go check them out.
But some of those I'm
I'll
just like
link-
flying
I'll link
through.
them
I'm not
below.
like spending a lot. I got to write my Goodreads review, right? And that's not the way you should
You have
do it,
great
right?
reviews, yeah.
But it's not the way you should do it. It's like, I
Yeah.
get to write
Yeah.
my Goodreads review. I can share 3, 4, 5 paragraphs.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm doing. Sometimes I'm just like, I got to get my Goodreads review
Yeah.
done because you're going to
Yeah.
wonder where it is, right? So
I do love seeing them.
but I should probably slow it down, and maybe not on a chapter by chapter basis, but certainly when it's done, like write a little bit more detailed
Yeah.
to just be that refresher. Because it's hard to even like, we're going to talk about this book, and if it's blank and it's 400 pages, it's like, how do I
Yeah.
refresh my thoughts on it, right? So I will probably do a little bit more of this, but I don't know that I'll do it as much if we're not actually doing a video.
Yeah,
on it,
yeah.
right? So
One of the things not to belabor this point, we'll stop after this because I know we've been on for a minute, but I remember, I think it was a Bella documentary I was watching recently, and Rushdie was just talking about like how when he's like writing fiction, for example, he can't really read books at the same time because of all the ideas going on in his head, but he's like, oh well, you know, I'll have marked up like really good pages from a book, and I'll just open a book to, you know, a page that I really liked and just read that page.
That's
And it'll be
interesting.
like
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, because you're not going to want to reread, I don't know, every book, but
to
if you
find
wanna-
to find
yeah.
what it is that you're looking for to inspire you. I
Yeah,
agree. Like
yeah.
I don't have a rhythm to that balance to figure that out yet, but I will work on it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I also read differently. I have a cup of coffee, I have a book, I'm sitting
Yes.
there. Like it's hard to have.
We made
paper
coffee
and-
this morning.
Yeah.
First time using what is it? Not a French press, but an AeroPress.
Well, you made it, and
Yes.
I.
It was stronger than I
took
thought.
Pictures of it.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little shaky right now. Okay. Any more notes that you had?
Well, so the lamp, which comes
Oh, I
up,
love that scene.
which comes up through.
Yes.
You want to talk a little bit because it comes up throughout the book, right?
does.
It hits early because she works at a lamp store, or
She
store?
works at a lamp store.
And-
She works
and-
at a lamp store, then a jewelry store. Do you want to read that page? Because I really like.
I wrote it. That was on page 24.
Read the whole thing.
Myra would sit in the lamp store and gaze at one lamp in particular. It had green blobs and red blobs, little polished stones of colored glass that were held together by a network of iron. The shade was a half oval with a beautiful iron stand. It was the most wonderful thing. I wrote down a bear, right? Like, is she a bear?
But it's an object.
I know. She
know,
would
it's
sit and wait for the day to turn dark when she could turn off every other lamp and stare at her favorite, with its translucent stones illuminated from within. She would spin the shade so gently, and its colored light would fall on the walls and her. Since the lamp she liked best was the least expensive one, it was possible that one day she might own it if no one bought it first. Perhaps the fact that it was the least expensive one was the reason she had made it her favorite. There's no point in loving something that is not a bit within reach. It was the essential humility of the lamp that drew her to it. It had not been made by someone with any sort of insight into how a person might want to appear to others, or who believed that people acquired things to show them off to their friends. It had not been made by someone who imagined that an object fit into a greater system of values, or could place its owner among others with similar tastes. It had been made by a humble person who simply thought, now I will make my next lamp.
That's my favorite paragraph.
Yeah, and then just one more paragraph, and then the chapter's over. It goes on to say, whenever Mira came in for her shift, the first thing she did was look to see if the lamp was still there. It always was. She guessed that her boss must know how much she liked it, although she never asked. Probably every employee had their favorite lamp, which made me wonder, I wrote all bears with a question mark. Like, does everybody have a little bit of bear in them? And I agree, it's an object.
It's it's art almost.
But she loved.
Yeah, she does love the lamp. Doesn't she? Does she steal it or does she buy it? I think she takes it.
She definitely ends up with it.
I think
because at the end of the book, remember what happens to the lamp? Right, there's the fire.
Yes.
And she doesn't have anything that there's a fire.
They ask her.
The fireman asks her, "Is there anything we need to get? Right? Is there anything we need to get out of your?" And she said, "No."
No.
And
the lamp ends up being like the only thing that's damaged.
It wasn't from the fire. It broke. Maybe the fireman stepped on it.
Yeah, I think they stepped on it.
Yeah, there was in a box and it got damaged. So yes.
And she's like, well, if everything got damaged, I'd have been fine. But because it's just a lamp, she's upset.
Yeah.
But then there's a part where a really beautiful page where she works at, where does she work at? The jewelry store?
So getting back to the lamp being damaged, it happens towards the very end of the book, and in the chapter it says, then she noticed a caved-in cardboard box. She had left it, so the box with the lamp in it, she had left it on the floor, not yet unpacked. One of the firemen had stepped in it. When Mira leaned down to open it, she found her lamp was totally mangled. She let the red and green stones fall through her hands. Of course she would have wanted to save the lamp, but when she had been asked what she wanted to save, she had forgotten everything. If everything else had been, this is what you were saying, right? If everything else had also been ruined, perhaps she wouldn't be so upset. But her lamp was the only thing made it the best thing. Goes on to say,
because it's the only thing that was ruined.
Right.
It's the best thing in her mind.
She goes on to say she had given no thought to this precious thing. How could she have forgotten that the lamp was better than anything?
Better than anything. Which again, she's placing objects over anything else. I don't know if we want to talk about the people that are in her life. I mean, Annie, she seems to have almost this romantic attraction to Annie, but there's kind of an odd thing because, well, Annie, so there's a group of people, including Maddie. Mm-hmm. I don't remember if they mentioned the other names.
I don't think they did.
But they're in the school, and then Annie's like seen as this outside, like, it's almost like they talk about her like she's like mystical, like almost like she's like in that second draft, or like knows something they don't, or whatever it might be. And she really likes this Annie and like wants nothing more than to be approved by her. I don't know if you have like a page number.
So, but Annie was a bird.
Was she?
I'm asking. I thought she was.
I didn't think so. Maybe.
Hang on, I'm gonna go back here.
Actually, I mean, I guess, because what else would she be?
Right, and I wonder if she's...
No, maybe she's a bear. I think she's a bear. Don't they say she's a bear?
No. So...
Because she has that... She's always with, like, one person.
A bird-like woman named Mira. Annie, who seems to be a distant fish. I meant fish, not...
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Seems
she's not
to
a
be
bear, right?
Fish.
But I wonder if... She does feel a little mystical.
I was just off with both of them. Yeah, she does.
Right.
She is... she looks down on Mira because of the people in her group at a certain point.
Yeah.
Because they make some comments and she's like, what the heck? I don't know. It's a hard thing to talk about the different characters because they're just not really developed. Even Mira isn't really developed as much as her emotions are described. Mm-hmm. Neither is her father. But, yeah, I mean, Annie is...
But I think Mira did have a... At one point, didn't she kiss her?
I think towards the end, like she didn't have a relationship with her at the beginning. She wanted one.
She didn't want one.
And then Annie kind of like was like, nope. And then Annie, she's calling out to Annie through the leaf.
Yeah.
Again, this is all crazy jumbled, but it's, I don't know. It's so interesting how those little like tidbits. Here we are trying to like connect all of them, which is not the easiest thing.
End of the book. Did you say what happened at the end of the book? Because she's with Annie at the end, right? When she...
Yeah, say whatever you want.
Dies. Right?
When Mira dies.
Yes, she's with Annie. Doesn't Annie come to her and she?
Yes,
her?
this time it was Mira. I don't know why I kind of blanked out on the ending for some reason. Yes, you're right, because Mira is sick. So Annie becomes a fixer. It's all coming back to me now. So Annie becomes a fixer, and Mira basically tells her that you're wasting your time.
Yeah, don't be a
because
fixer.
you're trying to care about everybody and trying to fix everything.
Right.
So yes, it's obvious that she's a fish. I don't know why. I think because I read like the first half of the book at one time and the second half another time, I lost my train of thought. But yes, she's a fixer. Mira's telling her not to be, but at the end of her life, it's Annie who is taking care of everyone, going from house to house, helping out people, comes to this house to help this person, and the person is Mira. So Mira feels cared for in a way, but really Annie is just caring for everyone. She's just helping everybody she can. And so there's that kind of bear inside of it because it feels like it's the individual person. It's just, I don't know. It's really interesting.
It is, and it's confusing.
Yes, it is confusing. Another thing,
and it's hard to think. It's hard every time you are reading about somebody. It's like, okay, wait, are they being a bear or a fish or a bird? And it's just weird.
It gets in your head.
It is in your head a little bit, and then it's like, okay, wait a second. A bear is this, a fish is that, a bird is that.
You gotta
so you're flipping
remember,
back to the beginning. Yeah, it is. It's like a whole world you're trying to adapt, and figure out how these characters fit into it.
Yeah. But I mean, you see, it's even that. Like, the bird flies high, but sometimes a bird is with a bajillion people. It's like every part of it is a little. There's exceptions to the rule, of course. You really can't fit in these categories. But another thing I wanted to bring up, the internet.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up Mars, but we'll talk about the internet then. Let's come back to Mars.
So what did you think? Because when I was listening to a podcast with Sheila Heti, she said quite a few times the pre-internet times when referring to the first draft.
Yeah.
Did that seem that way to you at all?
I thought there were many references to sort of just the grind of living in today's world with, all of the different things we have going on.
But
and
it seems like
she makes reference to phones a lot. At least she did a few times.
But it wasn't. So at one point, Mira was in pre-internet times for sure, especially in the lamp store, all those things. Where was she on phones?
Well, she mentioned. I'll have to find where it is. That's why it's hard.
Yeah.
Okay, so reference to phones is on page 13. So they're just talking about the world, and then they close this with they just didn't consider the fact that one day they would be walking around with phones in the future, out of which people who had far more charisma than they did would let flow an endless stream of images and words. They just had no idea that the world would become so big, or the competition so stiff.
So that's what's interesting, because it does seem like everybody encounters like 7 people in this book, and that's like their entire life. But that's what I mean. But Mira is before those phones, which is just what's interesting, because we're in the first draft, she's in the first draft, but the internet, it's an interesting thing to think about. I'm not sure I have quite gathered.
And I didn't highlight it, so I'm not finding it here, but I wrote down on page 19, she went on to say, again, with phones, right? She says, there are so many ways of being hated, and one can be hated by so many people.
Yeah.
I mean, she hates the internet world, the connectivity, it's not prevalent. It just so that's why I tried to write down where I saw references to it.
All the beautiful points. Do you know what I mean? Like, think about the jewelry store. Like, here's one. It was a beautiful fall day when Mira moved to the city with her boxes containing all of her things. As she drove, in whatever direction she looked, there was a blazing red tree or a wistful yellow one, and there were many trees that were buoyantly green, and others that had leaves which were orange and bright, and not one of the leaves had yet fallen on the ground, brittle and dry. There were no fallen leaves, the color of sidewalk. Mira's part of the world was experiencing 3 months of the slowest and most luxurious fall, and there was no rushing towards winter. Winter would come in its own time. So there's all these portions that feel so disconnected from the internet, because again, you see descriptions in books. There are great writers, right? But something like this, where it's almost like poetic, I just don't see that in prose a lot. That sort of attention to detail and like noticing everything. The same thing in the lamp store. It's like she's just sitting there staring at a lamp.
Could you be
Nobody does that.
Could you be any further removed from the internet and all the awfulness that it can, I mean, good, but awfulness that it can bring than living in a leaf. Right?
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's as disconnected as you could be.
So that's, I'll let you get to your thing, but 1 second. That's exactly what I mean when it's like, I guess I'm referencing the Goodreads review that I made, but I tried to say it like, because at a point I was kind of disappointed with the lack of plot that was occurring. And the sort of fragmentation that exists reminds me of, you know, certain DeLillo novels or Barth or whoever, but just that kind of like avant-garde ideas. But at the same time, it's kind of the opposite, because she uses the fragmenting to kind of explore like beauty and that we're missing, maybe, because it's all so quick and so I don't know if I'm definitely not explaining that well, but it's just interesting because things like the internet are very prevalent, and yet they're really not mentioned once. Maybe one time. The phones gets mentioned one time.
The phone.
So you have to make all these connections in your own head.
Yeah.
And so that's what's so
But
interesting
you do.
about the
It's
book.
because you're.
You figure it out. But yeah.
So I know I mentioned Mars, but I wanted to. There's obviously a lot in the book about death, right? So I found this to be really interesting. She says, my basic premise is that in life, you live forever, because as soon as you die, you don't realize you're dead. So you're kind of always alive. So the thing is, you shouldn't worry about yourself. The only ones to worry about are the people you leave behind who might have needed you, which right? And then she goes on to say, 150,000 people die in the world every day, and that's a huge number, and life goes on, right? It's sort of comical, right? And it's true. Like, I mean, when you think about all, but it's so such a significant number. And she goes on to say it's not a big tragedy, so it's not worth worrying about. What's the alternative? Well, there is no alternative. That's what I'm saying. What's the alternative? But so there's 150,000 people that die a day, and it may not affect you at all until like the person that's closest to you dies, or if you die and you were taking care of people long enough to get by without you. But it was just very interesting, obviously the conversation around death happens. It's throughout the entire book with her father, and then with her, with Maddie as well.
Is this who's saying this?
This may have just been sort of one of the biblical.
Oh yeah, okay. But that's like the point where, like right around there, is where she begins conversing with her father in the leaf. And I'm always impressed by writers who can do this. If you can see, it's just blocks of text, but you can kind of tell who's talking to who, right? So like, when you have parts that make you want to use them, what is the part that makes us want to love someone who doesn't love us back? Don't focus on that. What should I focus on then? That the probability of any person being around is 1 in a trillion, so it's almost a 0% chance of you being here. But you're going to have, 8 billion people, and those 8 billion people have won the lottery. And the worst part is that nobody realizes that.
Yeah.
They don't realize what a rare opportunity they have to observe the universe, because here's this amazing universe, and if humans hadn't evolved to this stage, they wouldn't know they were living in this beautiful place.
Right, and if you don't, right, what are the odds of you being born, right? Like, what are the odds, right? You won the lottery, you got to live your life, and I remember that I highlighted that as well. That I thought that was really interesting.
And I wasn't even intending to read that. I was just trying to show how interesting the dialogue is between them, because it's just so back and forth, and there's no exclamation points or even separation. But yeah, there's really cool ideas and everything. So again, this is a hard book to review.
Sticking with death, this is the internet comes up here, right?
Yeah.
So to talk about death, she talks about who would want to live forever. I mean, nobody would want to live forever. And she goes on to say, why would you want to? Why do they even want to live forever? To look at photos of things that they're not even a part of, right? Which sort of goes back to that again. Who cares? Or to be friends with 200 people and get 100 or 200 things on your feed each day? What kind of life is that for 1,000 years?
Yeah. Well, see, now here they seem to know about. Is this the God part, or is this a?
I think it is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, again, there's that like omnipresent.
The other thing that I found to be interesting was, do you remember the conversation around Mars?
No, you mentioned that, but
I did. So it's on this page. And with the whole premise of Mars was like, why are you spending time like trying to figure out how to colonize Mars? Like, try to figure out how to live on Earth, right?
I do remember that,
right?
Because that's very.
Why try to make Mars Earth-like when you have Earth? Just make Earth better. Just take care of Earth.
And there was some kind of direct shots in there.
Oh yeah.
I did like that. Yeah. You can read it out loud, or if you have any of it highlighted. But
I'll read it. What I don't remember is if in this chapter is where they also talk about if you were able to go back in time, it's important to have a skill so you can advance society when you go back in time.
See, that's funny because...
Which I thought was really interesting, right? If the premise was like, if you're going to go back in time 1,000 years, like if you're just going to go back and have no skills, like what, right? But if you like knew how to, right, create electricity, right? Then you could advance society by going back in time.
So there's a funny... We were watching the new Nate Bargatze special earlier this week, and he made the joke in this special about watching movies about history at the edge of his seat, like what's going to happen at Pearl Harbor or whatever. It's quite funny, but he said something like, and this is exactly what that reminded me of a few specials ago, which was, if they put me back in time and they asked me to prove it, I don't think I could. And they were like, well, like, oh, we have phones in the future, like how does that work?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just in your hand. Like he was even like, who's the next president?
Yeah.
And like it's like everything. It's like we're just here, and that's another thing, because like you just look at a computer and you're like, that's a computer. How does it work? It just does.
Yeah.
But this again, you fragment it. You see all these different things. That's kind of what the book is trying to do. I feel like that's another part with all the little sections and hints of, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just so interesting.
So this is back to the Mars, and that is where this, because talking about hydroplants and right,
wars over water.
Yeah, and how do you? So anyway, but it goes on to say, I think it's so dumb. People planning colonies on Mars. They should be planning things here, figuring out how to live here.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they think it's a mess. They want to go somewhere pure, but it's pure nothing. They want to transform Mars so it will be like the Earth instead of trying to make the best of this place. Right. And it's just.
And they're like, what? You're gonna have liquid water on Mars in 1 billion years? Like.
Yeah.
Okay. Like. Fine, like it's just stupid. Yeah,
it's tedious for people to try and correct their mistakes, but it's so much easier than making a new Earth. You can go to Mars and live in a bubble. I mean, it's so yeah. It was very interesting. It was very interesting.
The idea that you can't, there can't. Yeah, you should be working on the second draft. That's interesting. I mean, when it comes to writing, I'm sure she knows this very well. Although it's different for everybody, but that second draft, that time when you have to, it's easy to get the words out and to write the story and to whatever. A lot of the time, but going back and being like, I gotta move these timelines around, I gotta delete this part that I really love, and I gotta change like the second, fixing your mistakes. It's a lot easier to be like, well, I'll just start another thing or whatever.
So where would God start on the second draft of
exactly.
It's sort of interesting.
No, you just go to Mars. Yeah,
start all over again.
But yeah, I don't know. It's pretty funny. Yeah, I mean, all right. Well, I feel like this is very, very long at this point, so I think we're going to call it. I know that most of this was just us reading and talking ideas in a scattered fashion, but that's kind of what the book is. Did this make you feel, after this, do you like it a little bit more? Because I feel like this is like what the book's meant to do.
Yeah, I loved the book to start.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved it, and then it sort of settled in at a lower level.
You like the beginning and the ending a lot, really.
I like the ending more than the middle, but less than the beginning.
Yeah.
I thought the beginning was
great.
Yeah, it was. It was like, and maybe that was my immediate reaction as I was reading this, is by not sustaining it, I'm not sure I love this book. But I really, really liked it, and I thought the beginning was sensational. It was just hard to sustain for me at that level. The middle was a little bit longer than maybe. As short of a book as it is, it's hard to say that it was longer, but maybe a little bit too much time was spent there. But yeah, I do think it was like, this is sort of it's what it's like to read the book. I mean, it's sort of all over the place, and but I enjoyed it, and I would for sure recommend you giving it a read, because
it's short.
You probably could read the book in as much time as you spend just watching the video. I mean, it's a quick read, right? It's a quick read. You'll maybe want to spend more time with it and slow it down and go back and read it. But if you were just reading it, cover to cover, you'd get through it pretty quickly.
Because like we said, there's a lot of pages with a lot of white space, and it's already only 170 pages or whatever it is. So,
but I thought some of this was ingenious. I would for sure be interested in reading some of her other work. I wasn't familiar with her of this story nor anything else that she's written, so I would for sure go check something else out.
And I should say, I mean, I don't know if this is calling us out in any way, but this was kind of a response to the criticism that Motherhood got. She wrote a book called Motherhood, which was huge as well, and she thought a lot of people didn't understand the book at all, and the reviews were, some of the reviews were poor. I mean, I know a lot of people love the book, and I haven't read it. I'm sure I would love it. but she thought a lot of people didn't understand it, and she was like, what is this need we have to go and critique everyone's work? And it can kind of seem like a soft thing, like, oh, the author's upset that the whatever's bad. But if you put a lot of hard work into something, it's just interesting that there are people who feel the need to judge it, especially taking it out of the context. It's just interesting.
Have you seen her talk about Pure Color, or?
I've heard her. I listened to her talk a bit about Pure Color, why she wrote it, things like that. So that's another interesting thing to check out. But yeah, I think there was an interview with her and Merv Emre, who I really like as a reviewer and good writer as well. So, but yeah, obviously this is I think that this is a very popular or like hyped up book. I've seen this in a lot of places, and a lot of people talk about it. So I think it's really cool, and I think Motherhood was generally well received as well. But that was kind of the concept of the book, I think. Was to examine like criticism, and it's just interesting in all the ways that this can take you. I think this is a perfect idea. The reason I like this is because it's like, oftentimes, I don't mean to sound like pretentious, but oftentimes I enjoy reading, not always classmates, but like a lot of the MFA students at my school, or some of my professors, or like people I know, friends from high school. I have friends from high school who actually I'm going to do a video with one very soon, and it just feels like their work what they're doing is so interesting to me, because they're just trying to get better at writing and trying to understand things, and they're not trying to, I mean, some of them are, but they're not trying to publish, they're not trying to be like, I want to sell this many copies of this book.
Yeah.
And it feels like, even with the standing she has, and even as many books as she's selling, and I'm actually surprised that this is as popular as it is, I do think, even though I do think it's very good, she's just trying to do that. It's like a project for her and her alone, kind of like that, the person made the lamp to say, here, I'm going to make a lamp. It does feel like that's what she's doing, and so even if there are parts that are flawed, it doesn't even really feel to me like it's worth critiquing. So that's an interesting thing to think about. But anyway, that's just a tangent. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I hope you enjoyed talking about it.
I did. Check out the book. For sure recommend it. I think you'll enjoy it. Appreciate you guys taking the time to watch.
If you somehow made it this far.
And thank you for having me back.
Yes, we will do some more in the future. Thank you for coming and taking so many notes this time, and being all prepared and all that. You kind of showed me up. But yeah, thank you guys all so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon.